Well, for more on what came out of this dialogue session, we crossed to our reporter Aldrin Sampear. He's live from Parktown. Aldrin, good afternoon to you. Definitely a common thread coming from the former presidents, from defending the Constitution to accountability of leadership. But we've been hearing these sort of sentiments coming from all sectors over the past few weeks and seeing different factions come together to talk about these issues. So when we see the likes of Thabo Mbeki joining the Klerk Foundation in a forum like this, what does that tell us?
Well, it definitely points to a crisis that the country is currently facing, and it's one of the questions that I asked the former President Thabo Mbeki as well as former President F.W. de Klerk in an interview that we had this morning, is whether outrightly they would say that we are facing a crisis. And F.W. de Klerk mentioning that there are pointers of a crisis. For instance, if you take into consideration the two downgrades, the junk status that the country has faced from the two rating agencies, as well as other issues in terms of the political state of the country. F.W. de Klerk making it clear, saying that he's not defending President Jacob Zuma. He is disappointed in President Jacob Zuma, but also making it clear that today's event is not an anti-Jacob Zuma event. It's not an event that is against President Jacob Zuma, but rather looking at the status quo that the country is currently facing. Thabo Mbeki also coming out and saying that this is a national crisis. He was quite clear about that as well. And you know, when you have the likes of Thabo Mbeki coming out, not using platforms that are made available to him, like the platform of the ANC, because if you consider that Thabo Mbeki is the former president of the ANC, he has access to the ANC's NEC meetings, and he could go into an ANC NEC meeting and raise various issues, some of those issues that he has raised here. And one of the questions that I asked him earlier on is whether he has raised these issues within the ANC, and he didn't come out right and say that he has raised these issues, but saying rather that during his time in government, they try to ensure that they respect the Constitution. Also saying that when he left government, he also told the ruling party about what it takes to govern, what it takes to be a governing party, and what it takes to be the person that's in charge of running the country. And it seems as though that he believes that there is this lack of respect of the Constitution, and that's the reason that we are seeing all these charges or all these cases against the government and all these cases against government decisions that have been taken being reviewed by the court. But we also spoke about the state of capture report, and it's quite interesting what his take is on the state of capture report, quite specifically on the remedial action that the former public protector Motlanthe has put in there, that there should be a judicial commission of inquiry set up, and it must be the Chief Justice Mogoeng, who's the current Chief Justice, who will have to appoint the judge and not President Jacob Zuma. And we all know that President Jacob Zuma is, of course, appealing that report as well as the recommendations set out in that report. But let's just take a quick listen to what Thabo Mbeki had to say about that recommendation that has been set out by the former public protector Motlanthe.
Now you have a report. Sure, it's an interim report on this issue of state capture. And that's a real challenge. And indeed, the point that was made by the former public protector, that let this matter be investigated by a judicial commission of inquiry.
Is that something that you'd support, though?
Sure, I think it's correct. I mean, it's a very serious allegation that you have the people elect a government, which has a manifesto. And as population who said, we want to hold this government to account to do what it said it has going to do, the reason we elected them. And then you discover, if the allegation of state capture is correct, that in fact it's not them who are governing. It's the person who has captured them who's actually governing. That's a crisis.
So, Aldrin, also interesting to hear earlier from former President de Klerk, who spoke on an emergency strategy to turn education around and his views on radical economic transformation.
Well, certainly that's another bone of contention here, considering that you have F.W. de Klerk, who was the last leader of the apartheid government state, And just looking at some of the reaction, for instance, on social media, is that some applaud. They are asking questions that why is FW de Klerk part of this initiative when this initiative is about having dialogue between society. And some saying that, for instance, if you look at the issue that de Klerk has been raising over and over again while standing at the podium, is the issue of being accountable to South Africans as well. And I saw a tweet that was sent out earlier on where the person who tweeted mentioned the Mthatha killings of about 5 youths in Mthatha who were killed in 1993 when the then government, which was presided over by FW de Klerk, believed that these were APLA operatives from the PAC, and they made sure that those 5 youths were killed, including the twins. And they are asking the question that where is the accountability that comes to that? I actually thought that today's event will also go into detail about the question of land, considering that this has been a topical issue that has grappled the country for the past few months since the ANC's since the ANC's January 8th statement that was delivered by President Jacob Zuma, and now calls as well for the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution to allow for the expropriation of land without compensation. But that message has not come out clearly. But these are probably some issues that will be raised during the dialogues that will be taking place, considering that this is not the end of the dialogue. There will be other initiatives that will be taking place, as well as people are allowed to raise some of the issues that the country is certainly facing. And FW de Klerk saying that, listen, today's discussion is not a discussion about anti-Zuma. It is a discussion about what happens post-Jacob Zuma. So what happens post-Jacob Zuma? How should a president behave post-President Jacob Zuma? What should a governing party behave post the current party that is in charge? So these are quite critical questions that are being raised here at this dialogue, and we're quite interesting to see how they unfold and how other political commentators respond to the fact that you have the likes of Thabo Mbeki standing next to FW de Klerk, and you have Kgalema Motlanthe also there, and the former Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka also being part of this initiative.
Absolutely, and of course a lot of prominent faces in the mix. They're also putting their questions forward. Certainly an interesting morning of discussions. Aldrin, thanks so much. Aldrin Sampear live from Parktown.